Beyond the Veil, the Enigma of Sidharani's Vanishing, Episode-2, The Guardian's Awakening. Final secret revealed, calm before opening of the restored family estate. Life had settled into a peaceful rhythm for Vidyasaman, Sidharani, and Arunakalam. The family had grown closer, and the painful truths of the past had been addressed. But even with the new harmony, Vidyasaman couldn't shake the feeling that something was still missing. There was one final thread in the tapestry of their family's story that hadn't been fully unraveled. The mystery surrounding the grandparents' affair and what had really led to Arunakalam's secret birth. Vidyasaman, determined to leave no stone unturned, decided to visit Anandarajan once more. The old man, though frail, still had a sharp mind and seemed to hold more knowledge than he had shared before. Vidyasaman hoped that whatever final secrets Anandarajan kept would bring full closure to their family's saga. Upon arriving at Anandarajan's home, Vidyasaman was greeted with a surprising revelation. Anandarajan had been expecting him, as if he knew Vidyasaman's mind had been troubled by the lingering mystery. The old man invited him in, and after offering tea, he sat quietly, as though gathering the strength to reveal something he had kept hidden for decades. Your grandparents loved each other deeply, Anandarajan began, but their love was caught up in forces much larger than themselves. Arunakalam's birth wasn't just the result of an affair. It was tied to a promise, one made long ago, under circumstances your family has kept buried. Vidyasaman was stunned but listened intently as Anandarajan continued to recount the story. The grandparents had been involved in an ancient family pact, a pact with another powerful family from a neighboring village. The two families had been bound by a vow to unite through marriage, but when love interfered with duty, everything unraveled. Vidyasaman's grandmother had fallen in love with someone outside the arranged match, and Arunakalam was born from this love. Your grandfather was caught in a dilemma, Anandarajan explained. He wanted to honor the family's pact, but he couldn't bring himself to abandon your grandmother, who had already carried Arunakalam in her womb. He decided to send the child away to protect both the family's honor and the woman he loved. Vidyasaman was speechless. The situation was far more complex than anyone had imagined. It wasn't just a matter of hiding a child out of fear of scandal, but a struggle between love, duty, and an ancient family obligation. Anandarajan then revealed the most shocking detail. The other family, still bound by the broken pact, had been watching Vidyasaman's family for years, waiting for a chance to claim what they believed was rightfully theirs. The final piece of the mystery lay in an old agreement, one that had never been honored. Vidyasaman returned home that night, shaken but resolute. He gathered Sidharani, Arunakalam, and their parents to share what he had learned. The revelation shocked them all, but it also explained why the grandparents had gone to such lengths to keep Arunakalam's birth a secret. They had been trying to protect the family from a powerful force that could have torn them apart. Sidharani, ever the voice of calm in the family, suggested they confront the other family directly. They needed to end the generations-old tension once and for all, and ensure that their future was not bound by the mistakes of the past. The family traveled to the neighboring village, where they arranged a meeting with the heads of the other family. The tension was palpable, but both sides were ready for closure. Vidyasaman and Arunakalam spoke on behalf of their family, explaining that they had uncovered the truth and were prepared to make amends for the broken pact. To their surprise, the other family had also long been yearning for resolution. They had no desire for revenge but had felt wronged by the broken promise, and they wanted acknowledgement. The meeting turned into a heartfelt conversation, with both families agreeing to end the feud and move forward in peace. With the pact finally resolved, Vidyasaman, Sidharani, and Arunakalam felt a weight lift from their shoulders. The family had not only uncovered every hidden secret but had also made peace with the complicated past. Their ancestors' mistakes no longer dictated their lives, Instead, they had forged a new path, one based on understanding, forgiveness, and unity. As they returned to their village, the siblings knew that the future, once shadowed by so much uncertainty, was now theirs to shape. The journey had come full circle, and while the ghosts of the past would always be a part of their story, they no longer held any power over the family's future. Sidharani, Vidyasaman, and Arunakalam stood at the edge of the restored estate, looking out at the horizon. Together, they had confronted the mysteries of the past, healed their family, and secured their legacy. As the sun set behind the hills, they knew that a new dawn awaited, a future filled with peace, love, and the promise of new beginnings. After the resolution with the neighboring family and the revelation of the ancient pact, life had mostly returned to normal for Vidyasaman, Sidharani, and Arunakalam. The family was united, the estate was thriving, and the once buried secrets were now out in the open. Yet, Sidharani couldn't shake the feeling that something more remained, something linked to her own mysterious disappearance. Although she had initially returned without fully understanding why she had felt so compelled to leave, Sidharani's instincts told her there was still one final mystery to solve. A strange dream had been haunting her since the resolution of the family feud, a dream of a hidden location in the mountains, shrouded in fog and whispers. Each night, the vision grew more vivid, showing her a place that seemed to call out to her. One morning, Sidharani decided to confide in Vidyasaman and Arunakalam. They listened intently as she described the dream and the uneasy feeling that followed. Arunakalam, ever the rational one, suggested that perhaps it was just her mind processing the recent events. But Vidyasaman, who had always trusted his sister's instincts, felt there might be more to her dreams than simple imagination. There's only one way to know for sure, Vidyasaman said. We need to find this place. The siblings decided to embark on a journey to the mountains, where they believed the answer to Sidharani's recurring dream could be found. Despite their parents' concerns, they felt this was a quest they needed to undertake. Arunakalam, though initially hesitant, agreed to join them, trusting that Sidharani's intuition had led them through difficult times before. The journey to the mountains was long and arduous. They followed narrow, winding paths through dense forests, with the fog often obscuring their view. Sidharani led the way, her dreams guiding her steps. As they climbed higher, the air grew colder, and the landscape more desolate. There was an eerie silence, broken only by the crunch of their footsteps on the rocky ground. After days of traveling, they reached a plateau, and Sidharani stopped suddenly. In front of them stood an ancient, crumbling structure, an old temple that had long been abandoned. It looked exactly like the place from her dreams. The temple's stone walls were covered in vines, and the entrance was blocked by debris from years of neglect. Despite its dilapidated state, the place had an undeniable pull, as though it held the answers they were seeking. This is it, Sidharani whispered. This is where I need to go. Vidyasaman and Arunakalam exchanged uneasy glances. The temple had an unsettling aura, but they knew they had to press on. Together, they cleared the debris blocking the entrance and stepped inside. The interior was dimly lit by shafts of sunlight breaking through cracks in the ceiling. The walls were adorned with faded murals, depicting scenes of ancient rituals and ceremonies. As they ventured deeper into the temple, the feeling of being watched grew stronger. Sidharani's heart raced, but she pressed forward, feeling as though something was guiding her steps. At the end of a long hallway, they found a small chamber, at the center of which stood an altar. Upon the altar was a single object, a worn, leather-bound journal. Sidharani reached for the journal, her hands trembling. As soon as she touched it, a wave of memories flooded her mind. It was as though the temple, the journal, and the mountain itself were unlocking something long buried deep within her consciousness. Flashes of her disappearance, her strange compulsion to leave the village, and her connection to the ancient pact began to surface. She opened the journal and began to read. The handwriting was familiar. It was the grandmother's. The journal detailed the true origins of the ancient pact, the reasons behind Arunachalam's birth, and something even more shocking, the pact had never truly been fulfilled. The dreams Sidharani had been experiencing were not just random. They were a warning. "This is why I left," Sidharani said, her voice shaking. "There's something else. Something we haven't discovered yet. And whatever it is, it's connected to me." Vidyasaman and Arunachalam stood by her side, their faces filled with concern. They had thought the secrets of their family's past had been fully uncovered, but this new discovery suggested otherwise. The journal hinted at an even greater mystery, one that threatened not just their family, but the entire village. "The search isn't over," Vidyasaman said quietly. "It's only just begun." As the siblings stood in the ancient temple, surrounded by the weight of their family's history, they realized that their journey was far from complete. Sidharani's disappearance had been the beginning of something much larger, something that would take them deeper into the mysteries of their past than they had ever imagined. With the journal as the guide, they prepared for the next phase of their search, knowing that the answers they sought could change everything they thought they knew about their family, their village, and themselves. The weight of the journal in Sidharani's hands felt like a tether between her and the generations of secrets it contained. As she, Vidyasaman, and Arunachalam stood in the ancient temple, they knew the journal had answers they desperately needed, but what those answers meant for their family and their future was still unclear. After leaving the temple, they returned to the estate, where they pored over the journal together. Page after page, it revealed deeper layers of the ancient pact that had governed their family for generations. The grandmother had documented every detail, the alliances forged, the broken promises, and the hidden sacrifices that had gone unnoticed. But one entry, toward the end of the journal, stood out from the rest. The entry was written in a hurried script, as though the grandmother had been anxious or fearful. It spoke of a hidden force, an old power tied to the pact. This power had been dormant for years, but the grandmother had feared that it might awaken one day. She mentioned a mysterious figure, referred to only as the guardian, who was meant to watch over the pact and ensure its terms were fulfilled. According to the journal, the guardian had disappeared long ago, but if ever the pact was broken, it would return, bringing with it consequences that could be devastating. As they read the ominous words, Sidharani felt a shiver run down her spine. She had always believed that her disappearance had been a strange, isolated event, but now it seemed that her vanishing was tied directly to this ancient power. Could the guardian have been the one who influenced her to leave? And if so, why? "We need to find out more about this guardian," Sidharani said, her voice tense. "If the journal is right, it might be the key to everything." Vidyasaman nodded in agreement. "If this figure exists, then it might explain why our family has been haunted by these secrets for so long. We need to know what role they played in the pact, and if they're still out there." Arunachalam, who had been quietly listening, spoke up. "There's someone in the village who might know. Elder Natesan. He's the oldest living person in the village, and he's always spoken in riddles about the past. If anyone knows about this guardian, it's him." The next morning, the three siblings set out to visit Elder Natesan. He lived in a small, weathered house at the edge of the village, far from the bustle of daily life. As they approached, the air seemed to thicken with anticipation. Natesan was known for his cryptic knowledge of the village's history, and many had sought his wisdom over the years, only to leave with more questions than answers. They knocked on his door, and after a few moments, the elder appeared. His frail form and deeply lined face belied a sharp mind and watchful eyes that seemed to see beyond the present. He welcomed them inside with a knowing smile, as though he had been expecting their visit all along. "You've come to ask about the Guardian," Nate-san said before they could even speak, his voice gravelly with age. The siblings exchanged startled glances. How did he already know? Was this another part of the strange, unseen forces that had been guiding their steps? Nate-san sat down slowly and motioned for them to do the same. "I've lived long enough to see the past repeat itself in many forms. Your family's pact was no ordinary agreement. It was forged with forces not of this world. The Guardian was the keeper of that balance, the one who ensured that the pact was honored, no matter the cost." Sidharani leaned forward. "But why did I disappear? Was it connected to the Guardian?" Nate-san's eyes met hers, and for a moment, his expression softened. "The Guardian's duty was to keep watch, but the pact was broken generations ago, long before your time. When a pact of that magnitude is broken, it sets off ripples that can span across time and generations. You, Sidharani, are connected to the pact in ways you don't fully understand. The Guardian called to you because you are tied to the very heart of the broken promise." Vidyasaman's brow furrowed in confusion. "What does that mean? Why her?" Nate-san sighed deeply. "The pact was never just about your grandparents. It was tied to the bloodline itself. The firstborn daughter in each generation carried a unique bond to the pact. Your grandmother tried to protect Sidharani by hiding the truth, but the pact cannot be avoided forever. The Guardian has been waiting for the day when it could call on the next in line." Sidharani's heart raced as she realized the gravity of Nate-san's words. The dreams, the disappearance, it was all because she had inherited a burden that had been passed down through her family's bloodline. She was the one who had to face the consequences of the broken pact. "So, what now?" Arunakalam asked, his voice low. "What does Sidharani need to do?" Nate-san's gaze turned somber. "There is a place, a final location tied to the pact. It is where the original agreement was made and where it must be either fulfilled or broken completely. If the pact is not resolved, the Guardian will return, and it will not be to guide, but to punish." The siblings sat in silence, absorbing the weight of what they had just learned. Their family's future, and possibly the entire village's, depended on what they did next. Sidharani, her mind reeling, stood up. "We have to find this place. I need to know what's at the heart of all this, and we need to end it, for good." Nate-san nodded, his eyes gleaming with both wisdom and warning. "You have little time. The Guardian has already awoken, and it will not wait much longer. But be careful, the path you are about to walk is fraught with danger, and not all will return unscathed." With Nate-san's cryptic words hanging in the air, the siblings knew their search was entering its most perilous phase. The answers they sought lay ahead, but so did unimaginable risks. As they left Nate-san's house, Sidharani felt a sense of dread creeping into her heart. The search had begun, but the journey to uncover the final truth, and to confront the Guardian, was only just starting. The journey to uncover the truth behind Sidharani's mysterious disappearance had led the siblings to dark revelations, and now, they faced the most dangerous chapter yet. The ancient pact that had governed their family's fate was awakening, and so was the Guardian, the entity tied to the broken promises of the past. After their conversation with Elder Nate-san, Sidharani, Vidyasaman, and Arunakalam wasted no time in preparing for the next move. The village elder had given them a cryptic clue about the location where the original pact had been made, a hidden place deep within the mountains, where no one from their generation had ever ventured. This was the final destination, where the pact could either be fulfilled or shattered completely. But time was running out. The Guardian was no longer just a figure of legend. It had reawakened, and its purpose was clear: to bring the broken pact to a grim resolution. "We have to be ready for anything," Vidyasaman said as they packed supplies for the journey. We don't know what's waiting for us at the end of this. Sidharani, though determined, was weighed down by the gravity of her role. If this is tied to me, then I need to be the one to face it. But I can't do it alone. We've come this far together, and we need to finish this together. Arunakalam, the pragmatic brother, agreed but urged caution. This isn't just about the pact. We're dealing with forces that go beyond anything we've faced. The Guardian isn't just a symbol, it's real, and it won't stop until the pact is either fulfilled or destroyed. With the journal as the guide and Nathan's warnings in their minds, the siblings set out once more into the mountains. The path was treacherous, much more so than the journey to the old temple. The higher they climbed, the more the air grew thick with tension, as if the very land was resisting their presence. Fog clung to the rocky paths, and the wind howled through the craggy peaks, creating an eerie backdrop to their trek. As they ventured deeper into the mountains, Sidharani's dreams returned with more intensity. Visions of the ancient pact and the terrifying figure of the Guardian haunted her every step. The Guardian was no longer just a distant threat. She could feel its presence growing stronger, as if it was watching their every move, waiting for them to reach the final destination. After days of navigating through the treacherous terrain, they arrived at a secluded valley. It was unlike anything they had seen before. The landscape was barren, devoid of life, and in the center stood a massive stone altar, weathered by centuries but still radiating an aura of power. This was the place, the original site of the pact. This is it, Sidharani whispered, her voice trembling. This is where it all began. As they approached the altar, the air grew colder, and a palpable sense of dread washed over them. Vidyasaman and Arunakalam exchanged nervous glances, but Sidharani stepped forward, feeling the weight of her destiny pulling her closer to the ancient stones. Suddenly, a deep, rumbling sound echoed through the valley. The ground trembled beneath their feet, and from the shadows, a figure emerged. The Guardian. It was a towering, spectral being, cloaked in darkness, its eyes glowing with an otherworldly light. Its presence was suffocating, and the air around it seemed to warp and twist, as if reality itself was bending to its will. The Guardian hovered above the altar, its gaze fixed on Sidharani. You have come, it spoke, its voice a deep, resonant echo that seemed to come from the very earth itself. The time has come to settle the debt of your ancestors. Sidharani's heart pounded in her chest, but she stood her ground. The pact was broken generations ago. Why am I the one who must face this? The Guardian's eyes flickered, and its voice darkened. The bloodline carries the weight of the promise. Your ancestors failed to fulfill their oath, and now, the price must be paid. You are the chosen one, bound by the same blood that forged the pact. It cannot be undone. Vidyasaman stepped forward, his voice steady. There must be another way. The pact was made under duress, under false pretenses. Why should Sidharani suffer for something she had no part in? The Guardian's gaze shifted to Vidyasaman, its glowing eyes narrowing. The pact is beyond mortal understanding. It binds not just the living but the very fabric of time and destiny. If it is not fulfilled, the consequences will be dire, not just for her, but for all of you, and for the village. Arunakalam, ever the rational one, spoke up. What does fulfilling the pact mean? What are you asking of her? The Guardian's presence loomed larger, and the shadows around it seemed to pulse with dark energy. The firstborn daughter must offer herself to the pact, as was intended. Only through her sacrifice can the balance be restored. A stunned silence followed the Guardian's words. Sidharani felt a wave of fear crash over her. Was this what her grandmother had feared all along? That one day, Sidharani would be called upon to give her life to uphold a pact she had never agreed to. No, Vidyasaman said, his voice defiant. There has to be another way. We won't let her sacrifice herself for a pact made centuries ago. The Guardian's voice thundered. There is no other way. The pact was sealed with blood, and only through blood can it be completed. Sidharani, shaken but resolute, stepped forward. I won't let this curse control my life, or my family's life. If the pact is to end, it ends here, and it ends with me, but not through sacrifice. As the words left her lips, the Guardian's form seemed to flicker, as if its hold on the world was weakening. For a brief moment, Sidharani felt something shift within her, a power, long dormant, awakening. It was the same force that had called her to the temple, the same instinct that had led her here. She realized, in that moment, that the bloodline didn't just carry the curse of the pact. It also carried the power to break it. Sidharani raised her hands toward the altar, her voice strong and clear. I reject the pact. I reject the cycle of sacrifice. I claim my right to end this once and for all. The Guardian let out a deafening roar, and the valley shook violently. But as Sidharani's resolve strengthened, the dark energy around the altar began to dissipate. The Guardian's form flickered and faded, its power draining away. The pact had been broken. As the last remnants of the Guardian vanished into the mist, Sidharani collapsed to her knees, exhausted but victorious. Vidyasaman and Arunakalam rushed to her side, their faces filled with relief and awe. The curse that had haunted their family for generations was finally over. In the days that followed, the valley returned to its natural state, and the weight of the past lifted from their hearts. The siblings had faced the darkness of their family's legacy and emerged stronger, their bond unbreakable. The mystery of Sidharani's disappearance had been solved, not through submission, but through courage and defiance. Sidharani had rewritten the ending of their family's story, and in doing so, secured their future, free from the shadows of the past. Sidharani's triumph over the Guardian had brought a sense of relief to the family and the village. The dark curse of the ancient pact had been broken, and with it, the weight that had hung over Sidharani, Vidyasaman, and Arunakalam for so long. Life was beginning to return to normal, or at least, as normal as things could be after everything they had been through. But as the days passed, Sidharani couldn't shake the feeling that something was still unresolved. The dreams had stopped, and the oppressive presence of the Guardian had vanished, yet she felt a strange emptiness inside her. While the pact had been broken, there was an undercurrent of unease that lingered. It was as though something had shifted, and not necessarily for the better. One evening, as the siblings sat in the quiet of their home, Sidharani voiced her concerns. I know the pact is broken, but I feel like there's something else we're missing. I can't explain it, but it's like a part of me is still connected to whatever was controlling the pact. Vidyasaman, ever the protective brother, frowned. You're just recovering from everything we've been through. It's natural to feel off after facing something like that. The Guardian is gone, Siddha. You've won. Arunakalam, who had been quietly observing, looked at his sister thoughtfully. Maybe the breaking of the pact wasn't the end of everything. There could be consequences we didn't foresee. We didn't fully understand the power of the pact. Maybe something else was released when we broke it. The siblings sat in silence, considering the implications of Arunakalam's words. While they had been focused on ending the curse, they hadn't considered what might happen afterward. The pact had held powerful forces in place for generations, and now that it was broken, there was no telling what might have been unleashed. That night, Sidharani couldn't sleep. Her mind raced with questions and worries. As she lay in bed, a soft breeze stirred through her window, and a sudden chill filled the room. She sat up, her heart pounding, and for a moment, she thought she saw a shadow move in the corner of the room. Her breath caught in her throat. It was subtle, but the presence felt familiar. Too familiar. The darkness that had once clung to the Guardian seemed to be creeping back into her life. She got out of bed and paced the room, trying to shake the feeling of dread. Maybe it was just her mind playing tricks on her, she thought. After everything they had been through, it wouldn't be surprising if her nerves were still on edge. But as she looked out the window toward the mountains, where the pact had once been sealed, she couldn't ignore the pull she felt deep inside her. The next morning, she told her brothers about what had happened during the night. Vidyasaman looked concerned but tried to reassure her. It's probably just aftershocks from everything. We've all been through a lot, and it's bound to take time to get back to normal. But Arunakalam's expression was more serious. No, he said quietly, I think Sidharani's right. There's something more happening here. We've broken the pact, but we didn't understand its full power. What if the pact wasn't just holding the Guardian in check, but something else? Something even older? Sidharani's stomach tightened at the thought. She had fought so hard to free herself and her family from the pact's grip, but the idea that breaking it could have unleashed something worse sent a chill through her. We need to go back, Sidharani said, her voice firm. Back to the valley where the altar was. If something was released when we broke the pact, it will be there. Vidyasaman shook his head. No way. We barely made it out last time, and that was with the pact holding back the Guardian. Who knows what we'll find if we go back now? But Sidharani wouldn't be deterred. We don't have a choice, Vidya. If there's something worse out there, we need to know what it is. We can't ignore it. After much debate, the siblings agreed to return to the valley. They gathered their supplies once more and set off toward the mountains. The journey was eerily familiar, but this time, the air was different. There was no oppressive fog, no whispering wind. Everything felt still, as though the world itself was holding its breath. When they reached the valley, they were shocked by what they saw. The once barren landscape had changed. The altar, which had been the focal point of the pact, was now cracked and crumbling, but more disturbing was the presence of strange markings on the ground around it, markings that hadn't been there before. Sidharani knelt down to examine the symbols. They were ancient, far older than anything they had seen in the journal. These symbols, she said quietly, they're not from our time. They're from something much older. Arunakalam studied them closely. I've seen these in some of the oldest texts our grandmother left behind. They're not just symbols. They're warnings. A sudden gust of wind swept through the valley, and for a brief moment, the siblings felt a presence around them, something cold and watchful, far more powerful than the Guardian had been. It was as though the very ground was alive with a dark energy, simmering just beneath the surface. Vidyasaman took a step back. We shouldn't be here. Sidharani stood up, her eyes locked on the altar. No, we need to be here. Whatever we unleashed, it's connected to this place. And we need to find out what it wants. As they stood in the center of the valley, the wind began to howl, and the ground beneath them trembled. The markings around the altar glowed faintly, and the air grew thick with an otherworldly energy. Suddenly, a voice, cold and ancient, echoed through the valley. You have broken the pact. Now, you must face the consequences. Sidharani's heart raced. The battle with the Guardian had been only the beginning. Something far more powerful, something far more dangerous, had been awakened and it was coming for them. Beyond the Veil, the Enigma of Sidharani's Vanishing, Episode 3 to be continued.